More and more people choose to move to Portugal. In fact, a recent study by Portuguese Migration shows that in 2021, the amount of people moving to Portugal reached 700,000 people, which makes it 7% of the whole population of Portugal. But you know what? I don't think that everybody should move to Portugal. And here's why. The first thing that you need to know is that the minimum wage here in Portugal is around 800 euros. The average pay is around 12 to 1500 euros per month. Why is this important? Well, if you want to come to Portugal to make money, that's not going to be the case, because if you choose to live in a bigger city like Lisbon or Porto, all your money will go towards paying your rent. But if you're planning to run your own business, for example, open a restaurant or a coffee shop, that might work for you. However, be careful because the market is oversaturated. There are so many places opening on a weekly basis. So make sure to do some research before opening something here in Lisbon, for example. When we planned to move to Portugal, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go to a few interviews, see what's happening. First of all, the amount of work that companies ask me to do and the salaries, I was like, what is going on? Is it like a joke? So I'm a product designer, for those of you who don't know that. Companies here ask me to do UX, UI, graphic, maybe some social media, maybe some marketing. And the salaries? I was like, no, that's not happening. The maximum salary I was offered here in Lisbon was the minimum wage in Canada, which is around 1800 euros. And don't get me wrong, it's a good salary if you're planning to live outside of Lisbon, but if you're planning to stay in a big city, well, this amount of money will only cover your rent, that's it. Even though the salaries are kind of low in Portugal, but you have this job security. If your employer wants to fire you, it's gonna take them a lot of time. Unlike in Canada, for example, where they can be, hey, this is your 2 weeks notice, ciao bello. And speaking of money, do not move to Portugal if you don't know your tax obligations. And that might be important for some and not super important for others. It doesn't matter whether you're retiring or you're working remotely, you should know how much taxes you're going to pay. For example, in Portugal, there's a special regime called NHR, non-habitual resident, which made for highly skilled immigrants. And what it does, it helps you reduce your tax rate for the next 10 years. And if you want to benefit from it, I'd say go talk to an accountant, go talk to immigration people, because they will know. I know people who are eligible for NHR, but they missed a deadline and now they paid more taxes than they were supposed to when they just moved to Portugal. And for things like getting NHR, you might need to speak some language. So if you don't want to learn Portuguese, why bother moving to Portugal? And while you can get away with not speaking Portuguese while living in Portugal, I highly recommend that you take some courses, maybe install some apps, or at least learn some basic phrases so you can navigate your life in Portugal. Because all the government institutions, you need a health number, they speak Portuguese. You need to exchange your driver's license? Yeah, well, they speak Portuguese. You need to do something with your tax papers? Yeah, again, you will need Portuguese. And if you're planning to work in Portugal, you might need Portuguese for your work, to some extent, I guess. If you have a natural gift for languages or you have masters in languages like Miss Yulia, you might pick up some words and phrases here and there. For me, I know a lot of words and phrases simply because I go to the stores, I do my groceries, like I know words because I see them. However, in general, I would say take a course, install the app, watch some Portuguese YouTube when you have this at least base of Portuguese language. Again, it's super nice to know at least a little bit of Portuguese. I'm not fluent, like I speak un poquito, but when I go to get my stuff done, for example, when I went to get my SNS number to a tiny city, I could tell the person working there, hey, I have an appointment, here are my documents, thank you and goodbye. Another group of people that shouldn't be moving to Portugal is people without a plan. So what visa will you have? What are processing times? How are you supposed to apply? What are the fees associated with your visa? How do you renew your residence card? Can you work with that visa? Can you DIY the application? You should have answers to all these questions because it's really important, especially if you're planning to, let's say, work. Maybe your type of visa will not allow you to work. If you think your case is not super straightforward, for example, you're not sure if your income is passive enough for a D7 visa, or you have some relatives that you want to bring to Portugal, some dependents, Talk to immigration lawyers. They know all that stuff. They work on those applications daily. Maybe they'll be like, hey, your income is not that passive. Maybe you should try this visa instead. And the next one is my favorite part. Don't move to Portugal if you have not experienced the Portuguese winter. And you might be thinking, well, Yulia, it's plus 15, plus 10, it is sunny, it is perfect. Yes, but there's a catch. I've said that many times, it is freaking cold inside of the apartments. I would wake up to plus 14 Celsius in our apartment because I forgot to turn on the AC. How pleasant is that? Not at all. If your apartment is not well built, not well insulated, well, first of all, it might get cold. Second of all, you might get mold, and that's not really nice. The wind is pretty chilly during the winter. Also, it's a bit humid. So yeah, it is warmer than, let's say, in Canada, where it's like minus 30 during the winter. However, you should be ready for things like cold apartments, humid apartments, and maybe even moldy apartments. And the next one is really important. Don't move to Portugal if you're not patient. And that's pretty much me. It took me 2 years to get used to things, because if you don't have patience, ooh, you're gonna be so stressed all the time. Portugal is slow. It's a well-known fact. Whether you need to get some paperwork done or sign a lease, it might take some time. At first, I was like super mad because my lifestyle, it's super fast-paced. Like, I used to live in Montreal. Even in my city, back in Russia, it was always like, you know, you're always doing things. Here, no, nobody's doing things. Everything is super slow. And it's a good and a bad thing. Like, I've learned to be patient, I've learned to be slow. Now, 2 years after, I'm kind of like, okay, well, it takes time, I guess. But one thing that I can't get used to is going to the post office. Because at first, I was terrified. I was like, what is happening? I go to the post office and I spent an hour there because people decide to chat, ask about the relatives, about the weekend, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like standing there being like, can I get my letter, please? Like, I literally need one piece of paper. Now, I'm just like, why would I stress about things that I cannot like change? I just like open my phone, get some work done, maybe read something. I'm just like, you know what? Maybe I'll just come some other time because I don't have time right now. But alongside with being patient, you might need to be a little bit proactive. As I've mentioned before, things take time. So I got my driver's license exchanged, I don't know, instantly, because I only have the car license. My husband has motorcycle and a car. It took him 1 year to exchange his license. Even though halfway in the process, they approved a new law saying if you have a Canadian driver's license, you don't need to exchange anything, you can just use the old one. So he goes to IMT, they're like, well, we acknowledge there is a law, but you can either cancel the whole thing and restart it, or you can just wait. But you cannot just wait because we want you to take the driving exam. And he was like, what? So he would go to IMT every single month, he would call them, he would write emails, and finally, 1 year after, he got his Portuguese driver's license. So, patience. That's what you need to bring to Portugal. Another thing that I keep telling people is that vacation and living in the country, those are not, you know, sisters, those are like distant relatives, because people come to Portugal for vacation, for a week or two. They're like, oh my God, it's a perfect place. We move in. I want to live here so bad. But then they move and they're like, well, things are kind of different. And I'm like, yeah, told ya. Because visiting is one thing, living there, another thing. When you move to a country, for example, Portugal, you're faced with whole other different challenges. For example, finding long-term accommodation, which is nuts because the prices are crazy. Also, it's the month of August, meaning nobody's working. Second of all, finding safe immigration appointments, getting things done in time, a whole lot of things to do. And I keep telling things and like stories about Portugal to my friends who have been here before, and they're like, we've never noticed that, like what? And then they come and they start noticing those things. For example, I keep telling people Lisbon is really loud. The amount of noise in the city is just ridiculous. Even though Montreal is the biggest city, I find it to be more quiet. Lisbon is just crazy. My friends came to visit the other month and they were like, oh shit, can we like close everything in this house so it's like nice and quiet? Because A, you have airplanes pretty much everywhere in the city. Second of all, you have dogs barking, people honking, garbage trucks at 2 a.m. My favorite ones. Like why? I'm sleeping, like I wake up because the garbage guys, they decide to have a conversation at 2 a.m. like next to my windows. But when you're a tourist, you don't know these things because you live downtown in a hotel. Everything is perfect. On this channel, I'm keeping it real so you don't have those false expectations, I guess. Every time I see a video about life in Portugal, everything is sugar-coated. All the people like, oh, it's the best place on earth, you should all be moving here, everything is so amazing. No! Every country, every city, every place has its pros and its cons. And I think you should be aware of those. So if you're here for the real deal, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any new videos. Moving on to the next group of people that shouldn't be moving to Portugal. And those are people who think that they will move to a new country and the life will change. Well, I have bad news for you. It will not, kinda. I mean, the life itself, the place of living, it will change for sure. But if you're running from your problems or you're trying to run from yourself, well, nothing's gonna change for you. It's like those TikToks, I was depressed so I went to Italy. Now I'm in Italy and depressed. It's like moving to another country will not solve your problems. Of course, things about your life will change. For example, your routines, things you like to do, maybe some hobbies. For example, when I moved to Portugal, I started working out more, like doing healthy things that I didn't do in Canada. Even my diet, like I've noticed at some point that I prefer to eat fruits and veggies as opposed to, let's say, like pasta and rice. Yes, I still eat those, but much less. But if you're anxious, depressed, those things, they will come with you to your new place of living. And spoiler alert, those things, they might get even worse because moving to another place, to another city, it's so much stress. I feel like it took me 2 years to be like, hey Yulia, everything is fine, we moved, everything is good. And I'm like, less anxious now. And the most important one, don't move to Portugal if you didn't do your research. Portugal is many things, including good and bad. And sometimes people watch, let's say, YouTube or like Instagram and people are like, yeah, Portugal is amazing, move to Portugal. But then they come and they start learning about bad things that Portugal has to offer. And they're like, well, nobody told me about that. That's exactly why you need to do your research. And good for you because you've been watching this video for quite some time now. That means you started doing your research. I approve that. I see so many people moving to Portugal because it has nice weather and good food. Unfortunately, that is not enough unless you're 20 years old and you're like, whatever, I'm gonna take my backpack and just like move to Lisbon, fun. But if you're, let's say, 30, you need to think about other things. Healthcare, accommodation, cost of living, taxes, maybe schools for your kids, transportation, and the list goes on and on. If you're moving to Portugal, I hope this video helped you understand certain things. I wish you best of luck with your move. And if you're just thinking of moving to Portugal, check out this video about our life in Lisbon, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!